Welcome back to Wrestling Talk. I am Alexis Carrillo, and first and foremost, apologies for the delay on this week's episode, for the delay on this week's content on the YouTube channel. My day job has been keeping me pretty busy, and I've been trying to fight a cough, but no excuses. So here it is, filming it on a Sunday night. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of the wrestling world, and one thing that I want to touch upon first is the fact that AEW is really putting in some work with their women's division. It was a few months ago, well, not that many few months ago, it was actually like about 6 to 7 months ago when they decided to put the hottest wrestler on their show at that time, super over with the crowd, a great wrestler in her own right, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. They decided to put the strap on her, and apparently that took off. She kept getting huge reactions, she kept getting great wins, but at some point late last year, they kind of cooled her off a bit. They weren't giving her that main event slot. They weren't giving Britt Baker those big programs that she would need to maintain herself at the top of the AEW landscape. And even though she was mentioned by CM Punk as one of the pillars in one of those zingers that he delivered to MJF, which isn't wrong, she is one of AEW's pillars, the fact of the matter remains that Britt Baker right now is far from where she used to be when she first captured the AEW Women's World Championship. Now, this might change in the coming weeks, in the coming months. I hope it does, because first and foremost, AEW just came up with a very smart way of keeping the badass that they're trying to build in Jade Cargill, the brand new TBS champion, away from Britt Baker. Because they know, AEW knows that they do not want to have Britt Baker lose the title to Jade Cargill anytime soon, but they also can't have Jade Cargill keep getting wins and wins and maintain that undefeated streak and being that bitch without being able to challenge for the Women's World Championship. Now, eventually that match will happen. Eventually Jade Cargill will get a shot at the main title in the women's division in AEW. But for now, she's going to build her reputation. She's going to make her winning streak even longer and that much better. And that's going to keep them away from each other for the time being. And I think AEW did that for a reason. Because right now, All Elite Wrestling is building up to Britt Baker defending, and not only this, I believe that Britt Baker will at one point in the very near future, 2, 3, 4 months from now, maybe even sooner, at one point in the future, Britt Baker's going to drop her Women's World Championship to her most famed rival, to her most hated rival, in Thunder Rosa. And Thunder Rosa signed on to AEW last year. And we all remember that bloody match that they both had on the St. Patrick's Day edition of Dynamite that caught the wrestling world on fire, that made headlines. As a matter of fact, I believe that match, that moment, the mere shot of Dr. Britt Baker, bloodied with a crimson mask on her, is one of the main points as to why Britt Baker is as over as she is today. And All Elite Wrestling is smart, very smart to try to build to that point. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't put it past them if they wanted to have Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa for the Women's World Championship pretty much at the exact 1 year mark of that very match, which would put it 2 months from now in March. And I would go for it, absolutely. Thunder Rosa, also somebody who is very, very over with the crowd. And right now, Thunder Rosa was also someone that AEW needed to protect. and they had Mercedes Martinez screw her out of her chase for the TBS championship. So right now, Thunder Rosa is going to be busy dealing with Mercedes Martinez, and once she's done with that, she's going to go after Britt Baker. But those are just my thoughts on the current state of the AEW Women's Division. At first, I thought, I want to give you my thoughts on the TBS title as well. It's fantastic that they found a way to keep Jade Cargill busy with that championship, but when they first announced the TBS title, I wasn't very happy with it. I wasn't. If the women's division had their own show, maybe that would warrant a mid-card title for them. But for right now, I just don't see the relevance or the trying to find the best word for it, the selling point, to put it in that way, of having two women's champions on AEW. Other than the fact that to keep someone else busy and to have all this talent that AEW is just loading their roster up with, that they have very little to do for them at the moment, I really see no other point that in the future have this big TBS and Women's World Title unification match. But other than that, the TBS Championship is going to serve its purpose right now. But those are my thoughts on the women's division. I think that's the road they're going on. I think Jade Cargill will have little to no opposition for the TBS Championship for the next 6 months, probably. Doesn't mean she's not going to have great matches with great opponents, but I don't think they're going to have Jade Cargill lose that title anytime soon. But leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the TBS Championship, on the current state of the Women's World Title, on my prediction of having Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa for the Women's World Title in the very near future. Leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions in the comment section below. And now that we're done with that, I want to talk about another AEW fact. And another AEW fact is that All Elite Wrestling has spent most of 2021 and pretty much the beginning of 2022, right now on January 16th, debuting new talent. They've been signing all this great talent in Mercedes Martinez, in Brody King, who just made his debut on Dynamite, I believe, last week, in Kyle O'Reilly, in Bobby Fish, in Bryan Danielson, in CM Punk, in Jay Lethal, and many, many more that they have continually signed. Ruby Soho as well. That they have continuously signed to bolster their roster up, to keep fans happy, to give them something to be excited for. They really have done a great job. Tony Khan has done a great job of signing all this former WWE, TNA, WCW, Ring of Honor, Major League Wrestling, NWA talent to contracts for his company. I'm not faulting that. I'm not blaming them for doing so. That's what they should be doing. If there's talent out there that's going to serve your company in the best way possible, that you can find a perfect way to use on the roster, in a program, in a match, in a segment, in whichever way, if you can do that, then go ahead and sign them. But the fact of the matter is, in my mind, AEW at this point is doing what WWE did back in 2019, which is just sign people to contracts to keep them on their luck and not have them be available to their competition. Now, be that as it may, 2019 had Ring of Honor Wrestling as viable competition to sign and poach those talented performers. It's 2022, and that's not really an option anymore because Ring of Honor Wrestling is currently inactive, to put it that way. And so AEW is just signing talent away so that WWE and Impact Wrestling are not able to have them on their shows. But my main issue with this is that, first of all, if every single week on Dynamite or on Rampage you have somebody else new, who is new, a new signing, debut on your show, it doesn't make it exciting to me. It doesn't make it as newsworthy. It just makes it run-of-the-mill for AEW. Because it seems to me that every single week that I tune into AEW programming, or I look at their social media, X wrestler, Y wrestler is all elite. Every single week. Every single time. It's like you're getting a burger for lunch every day. And at first, you were surprised. You were excited. I love burgers, man. I do. I want to eat burgers every day. Give me a burger every day. I'm going to give you a burger every day. But if you do that, if you eat a burger every day, it doesn't matter if you change the ingredients. If you have pickles on a burger on a Tuesday, and then on a Wednesday, you take the pickles off and you put some avocado on it. Still might be a tasty burger, but it's the same crap. It's the same shit. You're still eating burgers, and eventually you're going to get tired of said burgers. And so, that's my first point right there. And number two, you got to look at the numbers. And I'm not talking about this 18 to 49 demographic bullshit that everybody out there uses to spin stuff around. I'm talking about the overall viewers, the number that matters. AEW has problems, has issues to maintain an audience of at least 1 million viewers weekly for their show, for their broadcast. And I'm just talking about Dynamite here. For Rampage, it's a different question. They're struggling to keep 500,000 viewers on Rampage. So when you look at those numbers, all you got to do is think about it. All these debuts, yes, they're fantastic stars. They're great talent. They're newsworthy. The fans love them. But guess what? They're not tuning in. They're not bringing in new fans. And neither are WWE. They're not bringing new fans either. But at this point, if it's not helping your show out, what are you doing? Excuse me. So I think that's something that AEW should really look at. They should really look at fixing that issue and market their product in a better way. Because it doesn't matter if all these loyal AEW fans out there are just buzzing about the fact that Brody King made his debut for All Elite Wrestling this past week, and now he's great. Guess what? 2 years ago, Jeff Cobb was All Elite. Where the hell is he? You got other stars on their roster, like Brian Cage, like Rick Starks, like Powerhouse Hobbs, who they're doing little to nothing with. They got Pac sitting at home, doing nothing. And they keep bringing new talent in that they use sparingly. Then they take off the TV show, so they bring in somebody else, and that's what they basically have to do because their roster is so big they can't fit all of them onto their one or two shows. And yes, they got Dark, and yes, they got Elevation, but to me, those are low tier shows. They don't matter to me. Not in the grand scheme of things. I mean, Main Event doesn't matter for WWE. Explosion doesn't matter for Impact Wrestling. So why should Dark and Elevation? Because you as an AEW fan want to use that as an advantage? Because Tony Khan wants to spin that in his favor again? Go right ahead. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm sick of all these debuts. I'm sick of everybody. Their mom, their sister, their brother, their uncle, the neighbor's dog being All Elite. I'm sick of it. Just stick with the people you got. Build them up. See where that takes you. Alright? But again, those are just my humble thoughts on the matter. And if you have different thoughts, as I'm sure you do, leave them on the comment section below. Of course, I don't fault anyone out there who thinks otherwise or who's a fan of this. If you are, that's great for you. But it's just not my cup of tea for current AEW programming. So with that said, we move on to a company that I have stated multiple times, and I will continue to state multiple times on this broadcast today, next week, the week after that, and for years to come. My number two wrestling promotion, my favorite promotion, number two favorite promotion, currently in professional wrestling, is Impact Wrestling. And this past Saturday night, Impact Wrestling made quite some headlines with their Hard to Kill pay-per-view, which took place from the factory in Dallas, Texas. First of all, as I predicted, it opened up with the Ultimate X women's match, I believe, and then it closed with the only match on the card that could have been the main event of that show. And that was a Texas death match for the Women's Knockouts World Championship. And I'm going to get to that in my next segment. But for right now, I want to talk about what transpired on that show. And I've said this on this show, I've said this on social media, and I will continue to say this. What Scott D'Amore has done with Impact Wrestling since he and Don Callis took over in early 2018 is nothing short of brilliant. They turned a company like Impact Wrestling, which Warrington in 2012 was a clear number 2. By 2014, they were down at number 3, surpassed by Ring of Honor Wrestling. Even though they were on Spike TV, their product was shit. I can admit that. It was shit. And then in 2018, when they, rebranded a couple of times or 3 times, they went from TNA to Impact Wrestling, from Impact Wrestling to GFW, from GFW back to Impact Wrestling, and they were just a laughingstock. So what Scott D'Amore has done in 4 years, they've brought Impact Wrestling respect, they've brought Impact Wrestling back its loyal fan base, and even though some fans still put Impact Wrestling down as being just what TNA used to be, Impact Wrestling is still a respectable show. You know that if you tune into Impact Wrestling on Access TV, that you're going to have to watch a top-tier wrestling broadcast. It might have some comedy that you don't like. It might have some characters that you're not attracted to. But no one will deny that in that ring, in that squared circle, when you're surrounded by the Impact faithful, they put on a great show. And Hard to Kill proved that. So we gotta talk about the fact that it appears that they're going with the Ring of Honor Wrestling Invasion storyline, which is how they're selling it to us. Because that's not really the case, because Ring of Honor Wrestling is currently inactive. And as far as I know, and as far as it's being reported, all these stars that made their quote-unquote debut for Impact Wrestling at Hard to Kill are no longer signed to Ring of Honor Wrestling contracts. So yes, they're former Ring of Honor stars that have invaded Impact Wrestling's ring, but they're not currently signed to Ring of Honor Wrestling. This is pretty much their version of 2001's WCW and ECW invasion of WWF, where those companies no longer existed, but they were still brought in, and in storyline they invaded the then WWF. Now, excuse me, I don't know most of these stars. I do recognize Mike Bennett, I recognize Maria Canales Bennett, and I recognize Matt Taven. So, on that note alone, that excites me. if you were to ask me back in 2016, I wanted 3 men to lead Impact Wrestling, to be the face of that company, and to really define that era of Impact and put their companies on their back. And those 3 men were Ethan Carter III, EC3, who I firmly believe he should be appearing on Impact Wrestling very shortly. The second man on that list was Eli Drake, who is currently performing as L.A. Knight, on NXT, killing it, by the way. And number 3 was Mike Bennett. When he first made his debut in early 2016, I was a fan of his shtick. And then I read that he only signed a 1-year contract, which was a big red flag. Not just for Mike Bennett, but for Impact Wrestling itself. I mean, that company back then was in trouble. They couldn't sign stars to longer deals. So that was a big red flag. So his exit from the company was expected. Now he's back with a bigger profile. As far as I'm concerned, his personal life, his personal relationships have been sorted, and he's not dealing with so much issues right now. So he's a lot more focused on his profession, on his career. So gotta applaud that. But hey, they're being brought in as a tag team, as a rival tag team, as an invading tag team to the already short-handed tag team division that Impact has. I mean, Impact Wrestling, their tag division, all it has are the Good Brothers, which are, I believe, the current tag team champions. They have pretty much no challengers. They have the Bullet Club, whichever combination of those stars you want to deal with. And they have Finn Juice. David Finlay and Juice Robinson, former tag team champions, but they've gone back and forth with the Good Brothers time and time again. Hell, they did that pretty much for the most part of 2021, so they can't keep that up for very long. So OGK, inserting them into the equation, inserting them into the tag team division, gives them something to do. And, more stars from New Japan Pro Wrestling are coming back to Impact Wrestling. Jay White himself is coming back to Impact Wrestling in the coming weeks. Will they do something meaningful with him this time? Hopefully. It's hard because he's not their star. But hey, they put the World Championship on Kenny Omega at one point last year. So we'll see. And then we've got the former Ring of Honor World Women's World Champion in Roxy showing up and just staring Deonna Purrazzo down at a Hard to Kill. And unfortunately, Impact Wrestling hotshot the belt to Deonna Purrazzo. I get it. She's the virtuosa. I get it. She's your top guy. Your top gal, on your women's division. Over Mickie James, in my point. Even though Mickie James is still Knockouts champion. And yes, I have said it here. Deonna Purrazzo is the future of Impact Wrestling, and they should value her in that manner. But Impact Wrestling needs to learn how to build stuff. Build to these big-time matches. It was champion versus champion. And they did what? They did what on TV? They built it on social media. Big whoop. Big whoop. And yeah, they're on Access TV, which I get it. Anthem owns that network, so Impact Wrestling will never get canceled, but they can't reach a big enough audience for it to matter anymore. But yeah, Impact Wrestling made headlines at Hard to Kill. They brought in some former Ring of Honor stars, and they had a great all-around show. That's as much as I can say. We're now moving into my fourth segment, and the fact of the matter is, I was wrong about the main event. Not about it being the main event of the show, but Mickie James did retain. And you know what? I knew Mickie James was going to retain her Knockouts World Championship a whole entire day prior. I knew it 24 hours prior. You want to know why? Because the forbidden door that nobody thought would ever get opened was opened. Not only that, Mickie James kicked that door wide open. This past Friday night on SmackDown, well, not this past, a week prior. Again, sorry, I'm doing this on a Sunday. WWE announced that former multi-time women's champion and, stated by their commentary team, current Knockouts champion Mickie James was set to return to WWE for one night only in the Women's Royal Rumble match. Now I get why they did that. That creates headlines for WWE, that creates headlines for Impact Wrestling, that gets people talking. The forbidden door, the biggest forbidden door in the current professional wrestling industry, has been kicked wide open, and fans are just reveling in the chaos that this all brings. But it played against Impact Wrestling in my mind, because they did it 24 hours before their big pay-per-view of 2021, their very first big pay-per-view of 2021, and it was a guaranteed that Mickie James was going to retain her title. Why? Because it does much more for Impact Wrestling to have the current Knockouts champion Mickie James show up at the Rumble match than it does for a former WWE star, former legend, current Impact star, whatever that is, to the WWE fans, show up on that show. Show up for that match. And yes, Scott D'Amore sent in the pretty much obligatory tweet of, okay, Mickie James has to go through Deonna Purrazzo tonight at Hard to Kill to be able to walk into that Rumble match with the Knockouts Championship. He had to do that. He had to create some sense of doubt, some sense of worry for Mickie James. But most fans knew that that just wasn't going to happen, because then that deal doesn't benefit Impact. It benefits WWE because Mickie James returns. And the fans at the Rumble, I believe in St. Louis, Missouri, get that big pop. They get that big star returning for that one match. Now, will this lead to a future run for Mickie James at WrestleMania? I doubt it. I really doubt it, especially since this past Friday night, Lita made her return to WWE, and she pretty much laid the current SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte out. So if you're gonna give me a women's match for the SmackDown Women's Championship at WrestleMania, where I have to pick between Mickie James and Lita, 99 times out of 100, I'm gonna pick for Lita to return and for Lita to have that WrestleMania match. Just if I had to pick, that would be it. It seems like I do, so Lita will get that shot. Hey, but Mickie James, great. Forbidden door wide open. Let's see what that brings. And if I were Impact Wrestling, I'd be asking for AJ Styles to show up for Impact Wrestling for just one more match, one last final run for AJ Styles in Impact Wrestling. Something that he deserves, because his last run in early 2014, which was actually late 2013, was just laughable how they had him exit the company. So we'll see where that forbidden door takes Impact and WWE too. So it's not just AEW at this point. WWE is also involved. And with that said, we've got to talk about WWE as well. Because this past week, WWE got sued by a company in their business, in their industry. And that company goes by the name of Major League Wrestling. And the lawsuit states that, among other things, WWE is preventing MLW from growing its business and reaching more fans, more homes, and garnering a bigger fan base. Because it appears that Vice and the Fox-owned streaming service Tubi have cut pretty much all ties with the MLW programming, and MLW, Major League Wrestling, specifically Court Bauer and his lawyers, are stating, I believe, that WWE had something to do with this. That WWE pretty much got in between those negotiations, and WWE pretty much told Fox and Vice to not do business with Major League Wrestling. Which I understand can be viewed in that way. And the thing is, it's business. And in business, pretty much anything and everything is fair, as long as you respect the legal boundaries, of course. But the fact of the matter is, WWE did and does have a working relationship and business agreements with Fox and with Vice that precede their business and their arrangements with Major League Wrestling. Now, before you go ahead and go into the comments and say that, oh, you're supporting the corporation against the little guy. Boo-hoo. Like, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to go against the big corporations. Okay, I get it. Everyone loves a great underdog story. I love a great underdog story. But business is business. And now WWE might not be able to state that, okay, if you align with MLW and support their content and keep their content on your streaming services or whatever, if you keep doing business with them, we can't tell you that we're not gonna do business with you anymore. But we can infer it off the record. We can tell you that when renegotiation deals come up, you might have to pay up a heftier price. You might have to deal with other competitors taking our content away from you, which is also fair. Or if you cut your ties to Major League Wrestling and their programming, we might be more amicable to renewing our deals with you. I mean, you have SmackDown on Fox. You love that, right? And in most cases, our programming, our documentary, or your documentary style content benefits largely from WWE and our stars and our testimonials. So it's up to you. It's up to your choice. And of course, if I'm Fox and if I'm Vice and I'm looking to keep pro wrestling in my business and I'm looking to attract fans of that industry and of that fan base into our homes and into our content providers, of course I'm going to go with the top dog. I'm going to go with the best, with the clear bet, which is WWE. And Major League Wrestling, It sucks, but that's just how it goes. I mean, I feel for you, but it's business. It is business. Don't believe me? Go look at the president. Go look at the year 2000, when then TNN had ACW on their shows and on their content. And then WWF kept building and building their audience and getting better and better and better. And TNN, being the business that they are, went with the best business decision. What was best for business for them was to get WWE. And if that meant to stick it to ECW and kick them out of their network, so be it. And it appears that Vice and Fox are doing the same thing to MLW and Court Bauer. Again, it's just business. So with that said, those are my thoughts on the lawsuit of MLW versus WWE. We'll see where that goes. That's just how I understand it. That's just how my opinion on it is currently where it stands. So with that said, that was this week's episode of Wrestling Talk. And then next week, we're going to talk about a little bit more of the storylines involving Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, Impact, and much more of that. But for now, I've been Alexis Carrillo. Have a great rest of your Sunday. And see you next time.